Yes, everybody, welcome back to another match preview on the channel. Hope you guys are keeping well and safe. And it's a big game this weekend as Wolves prepare to host Aston Villa at Molineux. It's going to be a really tricky game for Wolves. Villa picking up some fantastic form under Unai Emery. But as always, I'll be giving my thoughts ahead of the game, the latest team news, my predicted lineup. And we will have the opposition preview as well. A couple of things to start off with as well. Our thoughts with the family of Vicky Wright, who is the daughter of Wolves legend Billy Wright, who unfortunately passed away in the last day or so. She became a big part of the Wolves community over the last couple of years or so, wanted to retell her father's story, so obviously it's a big loss for the Wolves community. And once again, the old gold pack, who are pushing to try and get the Wolves atmosphere where it used to be. They're asking this weekend, if you haven't already seen it, I'll put it on the screen now, to bring your Wanderers scarf. So obviously there are some stands that don't have the flags and the tifos, so if you want to get involved, they want as many fans as they can to bring their Wolves scarves to the game at Molineux on Saturday as well. But it's going to be an interesting game for Wolves. We'd picked up some half-decent form. Our home form is still pretty decent, but obviously the big issue for Wolves at the moment is obviously that defeat against Brighton. It was an absolute disaster for Wolves. A 6-0 defeat, the biggest defeat for Wolves in the league for some time. And I said it on the podcast and I said it on the reaction. I don't want to see a result like that again for a long, long time. But Brighton were just far better than Wolves, but we made it very, very easy for them. And there's one thing bouncing back from a 2 or 3-0 defeat, but a 6-0 defeat, Wolves are going to have to really be on it. And you would assume Lopetegui had them hard at work this week, because it isn't all done. It's not all done and dusted. Obviously, we can still go down, but you'd really hope, if there's any game that the players aren't on the beach for, it's this one against Villa. We have tended to have half-decent form against them at Molineux in recent times, but the form that they've picked up under Emery has been fantastic. I'll put the league table up on the screen now. They're up to 7th as it stands in the league, 54 points, and very much within a shout of getting European football. We look at the bottom of the table now. Wolves still sat in 14th. We are 7 points clear of the drop zone. A win on Saturday and certain results going our way over the weekend will mean that Wolves will be mathematically safe from the drop. So I believe those results would need to be Wolves to win. So obviously we're up to 40 points with 3 games to go. And Forest and Everton to obviously lose, or Everton to draw and Forest to lose. So it's possible that the whole thing could finally be put to bed. But the Villa game is obviously going to be a difficult one. They dropped points last weekend against Manchester United. Wolves will want to sort of prove a point after the disaster. Defensively at home, we've been okay, but we really do need to bounce back with something. Lopetegui's had his pre-match press conference today. No major team news as such. The one doubt possibly going into the game will be Semedo, who's going to be assessed on Friday ahead of that injury to see if he's going to be ready for Saturday's game. Obviously, he did come off in the defeat to Brighton. But there's so many positions up in the air. Jose Sarr is one of those. Could we see for the first time maybe Dan Bentley coming in to take his place in goal? Been real discussion about that. We discussed it in depth on our podcast about Dan Bentley possibly coming in. Look, Lopetegui was a goalkeeper himself. He knows there's going to be games where you make errors, but at the end of the day, it's a results business. Lopetegui's going to have a way that he wants to play. And as it stands, us playing out from the back is very difficult with Jose Sarr, who, no disrespect, doesn't seem to be that comfortable on the ball. So would Dan Bentley come in? I think if he does, that would be the end of Jose Sarr. I think he'd be straight on the transfer list, or at least be requesting to leave the club, because it is humiliating for a goalkeeper to lose his place like that. The rest of the back four will be an intriguing one as well. Obviously, Kilman and Dawson have been pretty good there. Does Lopetegui keep his faith in those pair? Midfield, attack, just all over the place, really. So I will be intrigued to see how Lopetegui sort of reacts to that defeat and how we line up for this game. I'll put my predicted lineup on the screen now. I don't know. I mean, I've stuck Sarri in goal. I really, although there's shouts for Bentley to come in, I doubt Sarr will get dropped personally. I've gone with Bueno again at left back. I've gone with the same with Dawson and Kilman keeping their places. I have gone with Johnny, but I think Wolves will try their best to get Semedo in a place where. Actually, I'll put Semedo in there. I think Wolves will try their very, very best to keep him in the squad, but I think Johnny is obviously going to be the backup option there. You've got to play Cunha and Costa up front together, so I think you go with the midfield two again. I think it'll be Lamina and Ruben Neves once again, and your wide options I think are up for debate. I'd probably bring Sarabia back in, to be completely honest, and then possibly, I didn't dislike Neto, but even maybe Hwang as well. I would personally drop Nunes after a really disappointing display against Brighton, albeit obviously he did play the majority of that game at right back. But changes do need to be made, freshened up, and hopefully that's what we see against Villa, and hopefully we see a better performance again as well. But I did speak to Neil from the Love of Paul McGrath Aston Villa podcast to get his thoughts on Villa's rising form and what we can expect from Ambulance rivals on Saturday. So, Neil, thank you very much for jumping back on Talking Walls. You've just quickly said to me before we started, then you're in a much better mood. No wonder why. Villa flying high at the moment. But yeah, how you been keeping?
I mean, doing good. Yeah. It's been a while since we've spoken, but as you mentioned there, the turnaround in Villa's fortune has been undeniable and what's the word I'm trying to think, is unimaginable, I suppose, really, even from when we were the last time we spoke. So it's been an interesting couple of months, and even some really interesting news coming out of Spain last night with regards to the structure of how Aston Villa are going to be structured going forward. It's night and day to what we were even 6 to 9 months ago.
Yeah, I've been seeing that. I've been keeping an eye on that over the last sort of 12, 24 hours or so, and definitely exciting times for Villa. But I think it was sort of mid-January, early to mid-January we played last. And both clubs had just appointed new managers. Obviously, Unai Emery had come in for Villa. We'd just got Julian Lopetegui. And although things have improved definitely for Wolves, we're in a much better position. Touch wood, we should be a Premier League team. Things for Villa, especially over the last few months, have just gone crazy. The consistency, the amount of wins, and you're now in contention for European football. Which, if I asked you that question 6 months ago, you would have called me crazy. What's it been like for Villa over the last few months? What's the mood like with the fan base, Neil, at the moment?
Yeah, it's been it's been funny in a way, because it started off with, okay, we've won two in a row, or okay, we're unbeaten in two games. And then it was a case of, sorry, actually, I'll even go back even further. It was a case whereby we lost to Leicester, Wolves, or Leicester City and Arsenal in a row, and people were like going, new manager bounce, wheels are gone off again. Where the hell are we going to finish now? And what's the story? Then after that, we go 10 unbeaten before the weekend just gone. And that was funny, because it was a case of everyone just realized, and they went, oh, wait a minute, we're 4 unbeaten. And then before you know it, we're 5 unbeaten. And then we go on a 5-game run. And then we draw against Brentford and beat Fulham, and everyone's like, okay, we're 10 unbeaten in the Premier League, and this is a big feat. And we've done it largely with the same 11 players and 2 subs coming off the bench, whenever it's happened. And we come up against Manchester United at the weekend. Performance against Wolves, or against, sorry, I keep on saying Wolves because I know we're playing you guys, but performance against Brentford was lax in the first half. Performance against Fulham was lax in the second half. And then against Manchester United, they really hit us hard at the weekend. Now, we did get some joy later on in the game. We were unlucky not to take a point from it, but the better team won on the day. And it was so funny, everyone after the game was annoyed at losing to Manchester United, whereas, historically, Villa don't get anything from Manchester United. So there has been a bit of a sea change, a bit of a swing. Unai Emery is a fantastic ambassador for the club as well. He seems to be saying the right things at the moment. And I remember when we were on the last time, we spoke about Lopetegui as well, and about Emery, and the fact that, there were 2 real high-profile managers who had performed really well within La Liga, and it would be interesting to see how they get on in the Premier League. And, Lopetegui has has had a desired effect, I think, and I think
Yeah.
he's very much the type of manager that with the off season behind him, Wolves should see a greater return for what he can actually bring. I think.
Yeah, I mean, you look at I think Wolves had to go into the market as well with the
Mm.
position that we're in the table. Villa did a little bit, probably not as much as Wolves. So I would be really intrigued, especially with the new structure that you spoke about earlier on. It could be a really exciting summer, I think, for Aston Villa as well. Um, Obviously, back in January, we wouldn't have really, or you wouldn't have really been able to see or say what Emery had changed, but we've seen over the last few months, obviously the fantastic run that you've been on, but certain players as well, in particular, probably Ollie Watkins, who, whenever I watch him or wherever he seems to play against Wolves, gets himself in a couple of great positions, but for whatever reason, doesn't take opportunities. I think it was last season at Molineux, he went through on goal and put it wide, where 9 times out of 10 you would expect a Premier League striker to put it in the back of the
Mm.
net. All of a sudden, it's clicking for him. Do you think that's down to Emery? Do you think it's just good form and confidence from Watkins? And what else has Emery changed compared to the time under Steven Gerrard?
That's actually, yeah, it's a good question. So I think it all comes. The biggest beneficiary, as you said, was Ollie Watkins. And to be honest with you, realistically speaking, if Ollie Watkins didn't have his upturn in form, Villa wouldn't have had their upturn in form
Mm-hmm.
because he was lethal there for a while. I think he scored something like 12 goals in 14 games. It was something ridiculous. I'm open to correction on that. That may be nowhere
Yeah.
near the statistic, but it was a ridiculous run of form he was on. But the biggest reason, the biggest way that Unai has kind of unlocked that is really just kind of putting trust in him. Number one up top, that's from the one to one, the personal level. But our midfield has become so much more robust and dynamic in the same at the same time. Playing four central midfielders essentially in the in midfield,
Mm-hmm.
utilizing that kind of rotational box midfield that you see is kind of haute couture at the moment. That specifically on the continent has allowed us to play really, really narrow through the middle. Um, it's a strange one because a lot of people would have expected Ollie Watkins to perform better up top with a more stagnant partner. What I mean by that, a more familiar partner, somebody who's played with him week in, week out. And I suppose really you could say Buendia has been that guy, but it has kind of flipped between Buendia and Bailey. And
Yeah.
realistically, Watkins has still gotten into the positions to score those goals. So he demands, or the Unai Emery kind of tactic does demand a bit of selflessness from the other person playing alongside Ollie Watkins at times, but he's certainly made the most of Unai's early tenure, and I think actually as well, just to touch on Alex Moreno, he's
Yeah.
really the only player we really brought in during the January transfer window, and he has brought a different dynamic because he is our massive threat at bombing into the box down that left wing. He's got latent pace, and if he gets in behind a fullback, the fullback will have to take him down, or he's going to be able to throw the ball across the box. We've gotten some great joy out of that too as well, which has been a complete sea change to the Luca Dean stand and deliver from the corner of the area and deliver a cross in, which we haven't really been very good at connecting with.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite an interesting transfer move in January as well. Obviously, letting Danny Ings go, which obviously is probably giving Ollie Watkins a little bit more time up front, and obviously he's taking his chances. I know we're speaking a little bit early now, and obviously we don't know if Villa will break into European football. But where are the targets, or where are the areas that you think Emery has to target in the summer in terms of improving that squad for Villa overall?
Um, I'd be tempted to say everywhere. Really,
Mm,
we could do one player. Like we've got a threadbare squad. That's why we faltered against Brentford, Fulham, and Manchester United. Changing up of those players over the 10-game winning run. You know, the majority of those players would have played definitely between maybe 800 and 900 minutes at that during
mm,
that period of time, and some of those games had games midweek and so on. So, it wasn't ideal not to have that change of pace or that change up player, specifically when you've got a 37-year-old Ashley Young playing out of his skin at right back. But I think that's probably one area. I think a right back. I wouldn't be surprised to see a new right back come in to push Cash, or maybe to push Cash down the pecking order. Wouldn't I definitely think there's going to be another I definitely think there's going to be another centre half come in, just
mm.
to create competition there. We've got Diego Carlos on the bench, who will get into most squads in the Premier League, and that's good. But I think having maybe another right footer in there would be good. There'll be another midfielder. speaking on what, the 3rd of May here, I'd be absolutely blown away if Guendouzi wasn't an Aston Villa player. There's just too much smoke around that campfire at the moment. There was too much smoke in January as well. And I think realistically, we're going to see maybe the bones of five players, maybe 6 players come in at Villa. Maybe 2 defensive additions, Guendouzi, and then 2 to 3 attacking additions, whether they be more wide players or and definitely an up top player that can play. Now, maybe not a latent striker out there as well with Ollie Watkins, but somebody who can play that role at second support striker with Ollie Watkins up there. But Villa could sign more. We have holes in our squad. But one of the biggest things that will dictate Villa's transfer is Cameron Archer's banging him in for fun in the Championship. You've got Tim Ergbunum as well, who's playing really well for QPR, albeit that they've had a dip in form. Jedin Philogene Bides is playing well for Cardiff. He won their Young Player of the Year. Aaron Ramsey, not that Aaron Ramsey, our Aaron Ramsey is playing at is playing well for Middlesbrough. So we've got a lot of talent out on loan at the moment as well. It'll be interesting to see where they fit in, and I think really the amount of players that we sign will be dictated upon that. Upon, I suppose, where they come back, if they're seen as a fit, or maybe we might even see them depart, because it's one thing having good players come up through the ranks, but if they can't break into your first team, you want to be capitalizing on situations whereby maybe you can get 10 million for a youth player, 100% profit, and see what happens there. I don't advocate it, but I'd love to see them get integrated into the team. But it's exciting from that point of view as well.
Yeah, I think, again, one of those things will be, like I've mentioned, and I don't know, obviously, your opinion on it, but European football as well, with having homegrown players and so on, is obviously such a big part of that. I'll touch very quickly on that. Obviously, you've played 34 games. There's 4 games to go. Brighton are just behind you, but I've got games in hand. What are you sensing from the Villa sort of fan base? Is that Europe a possibility, or are you just happy to sort of be up there at the moment?
Europe is very much a possibility. And the reason I say that is because we've got Spurs and Brighton around us, and we've got to play them. Yet. Brighton have a ridiculous run in. They have, if I'm not mistaken, and once again, I get things wrong. I'm never 100% fallible, but I think they have Liverpool, they've got a lot of teams in the top 6 to play yet. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah,
they've got a lot of them to play.
United, Arsenal, Man City, and obviously yourselves on the final day. And Newcastle, So it'll be interesting on the final day if it's still all to play for at Villa Park as well. So you've probably got a slight advantage there.
Absolutely. But once again, as we've been kind of saying in our podcast since the Nottingham Forest game, we've been saying every game from here on in and here on out it's a European eliminator. Start to lose games, you start to drop points in 2 games in a row, then you're gone. So we've lost to Manchester United. Would have been brilliant to get a point out of it, but I think every Aston Villa fan in their heart and soul would have gone there with hope more than expectation. We got to go. We got to play Wolves, near neighbours at the weekend. Not going to be easy. Wolves aren't exactly out of the mire. There's no way you guys go down, by the way. There's some really turgid teams in the league this year.
I know.
But Wolves aren't going to want to see Villa get into Europe, So it's like party pooper central, that is the rake that Villa could step on, and Wolves have a fantastic team. Like, there's some really good players in that Wolves team as well that Villa have no right to go in there and go, we can score early, hold on to this lead, and trot off home. That's not how it goes in Villa Wolves games. So it's good. Like, I still remember, and I still have PTSD over being 2-0 up with 10 minutes to go and losing 3-2, So that kind of stuff takes time to leave. So if we lose at the weekend, we're gone. We won't get Europe. If we win at the weekend, well, then we're happy until the week after, when we have to play Liverpool. Then we see where we go from there on in.
Yeah, it's there's always been pretty close games between Wolves and Villa, especially back in the Premier League as well. And games at Molineux do tend to be very, very close. I think Wolves have edged it a couple of times. But this one will be interesting. We got absolutely smashed against Brighton last weekend, and some Wolves fans, including myself, we still don't know what happened there. But if there's any game that Wolves won't be on the beach for between now and the end of the season, you would assume it's going to be this one against Villa. I know, Neil, when we spoke in January, you picked out someone like Nathan Collins as a player that obviously you enjoy watching, but unfortunately he's not really been a part of the Wolves first team, or at least starting many games between now and obviously when we last spoke. But is there anyone else in that Wolves squad that you sort of worry going up against ahead of Saturday's game?
I like it. It's very much a worry about the team collective is my issue. Like, it's I'm struggling. I wanted to name one or two players, and I went, oh, maybe they might be injured at the moment. I should really do my homework in that way. But the thing about Wolves is Wolves are a good collective. Look, as you say, you got beaten badly against Brighton. Freak results, freak results like that happen, as I say. But Wolves have pace. They've pace when they attack. I remember you guys brought on what's his name, Ait Nouri, against us in the first game. Absolutely destroyed us down the left wing. Things like that. And that was Lopetegui. That was a great move out of him. This guy comes on and he has the freedom of the park down there, and I think he hit the post, and he 2 or 3 good saves from Martinez, and completely nearly changed the game. And that's what kind of Wolves. That's what Wolves have brought this year, is when you give them a chance to click. Yes, they haven't had a central striker that scored an awful lot of goals. I think that's an understatement. And I genuinely believe that's been the difference between the two clubs. Villa could just as easily be in 14th position, and Wolves could just as easily be in 7th or 8th position if they had a striker that went on a run of form, Golly Watkins. So, it's fine margins between the two teams. And it's a good manager against a good manager. And it's a case whereby, as I say, there will be an outstanding player on the field, but I couldn't tell you which team it will come from, and that's kind of what this tie always brings up. So it's going to be an interesting one. I know I completely danced around your question there. But it's how I feel. It's the truth, because usually you'd say, "Oh well, I'd be terrified of Raul Jimenez if he was banging form or whatever like that."
Yeah.
But it's just there isn't really a massive form player for Wolves at the moment. But the squad as a whole have players that match up well against Aston Villa.
Yeah, and very quickly before we finish, one player obviously that moved from Wolves to Villa, which was a bit of a surprise last summer deadline day, was Leander Dendoncker. Has he had much game time for you? What do Villa fans make of him?
Excuse me. So yeah, since this man here behind me, where is he? Since Kamara got injured, just behind me, since Kamara got injured, he's Dendoncker has really stepped in. There was a period of time when John McGinn played in that role, but Dendoncker has been really good, bar an absolute calamity of the last 5 minutes against Stevenage in the cup, whereby he was it was like. Have you ever seen that scene in Space Jam where the likes of Charles Barkley and all these guys, they touch the basketball and they lose all their powers? And then the aliens that's kind of what happened to Dendoncker for 5 minutes against Stevenage. He just forgot how to play football. But apart from that, he's been really, really solid. He took a long period of time out of the team. Recently, he's been one of these people that's allowed Douglas Luiz to go further forward, allowed John McGinn to go further forward, and he's a guy who doesn't want the trappings of he's like a guy who doesn't want the trappings of fame or the trappings of scoring a screamer from 40 yards or anything.
I agree.
He just wants to stick his foot in there, get his foot in the ball, pass it 6 yards left, right, or forward, and then just get on with life. That's his thing. And he's played a couple of games where he's not misplaced any passes, I think, and he's played some games where he's only misplaced one pass, and that's kind of what he's bringing, that steadying influence here, and also the ability to be able to drop back into a back three when Unai Emery does go to his back 6 or back 7 at times, when he does implement that, which is it sounds an awful lot worse than it is, but it's quite fun when you see it in action. Let me tell you.
No, I think their dog is like almost the definition of a really good squad player in the Premier League. And I think what you described there is very similar to how I saw him when he was playing alongside Matinho and Neves. They would give you the flair, they would give you the long range passes. And Dendoncker very rarely got the plaudits because he just did the simple stuff, almost the dirty work well. And like you said, just got on with it. But again, we had certain games, FA Cup semi-final, where for the last few moments of the game, like you just said, he forgot how to play football, gives away a penalty, and the rest is history. But yeah, it's good to hear that he's getting on well. And Neil, if I had to trouble you for a score prediction ahead of this game, I know it's a tough question, but what do you reckon?
Games under Unai Emery are always the easiest to give a score prediction for, because if you go something along the lines of 1-0, you're going to be
Yeah.
close enough, because we've had a very good defensive record recently. I think we've only conceded something like 4 goals from open play since we last lost to Arsenal, which is a ridiculous statistic. So I'm going to go 1-0 Aston Villa. And I think that Unai Emery skips the way back from back to Villa Park from there, because I think he'd just be delighted to get out of this with a win and keep the European dream alive. And I think the team are that way, because I think the team kind of are looking, going, this is a great chance. We don't want to blow it, and you know. You kind of need to be used to that feeling of protecting your position while you've got a team. Like, we have the points, Brighton need the points, but we still need a few more points, if that makes sense, to try and make certain of it. So it's nowhere near mathematically secured, and whether the team can meet the moment, and that will be interesting. But I'm going to go 1-0 Aston Villa.
Yeah, I think it'll be a close game, Neil. I do appreciate you jumping on Talking Walls. Before we finish off, where can people find you if they wish?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys can find me on @LoveMcGrathPod on Twitter, all over YouTube as well. The beauty about having the only podcast with Paul McGrath in the name is, if you type in "For the Love of Paul McGrath" podcast, you'll only find me. Did a bit on what looks to be the new Aston Villa director of football / sporting director, Mathieu Alemany from Barcelona, which is a really exciting appointment, I think, for Villa to swap Barcelona for Birmingham. You'd have to question his motives at times, but fair play to him if he's going to do that. And I jest here, because I've been in Birmingham twice this season, and both times I've gotten sunburned. So Costa del Birmingham is calling. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube, any of the podcasts, anywhere like that, and on Twitter as well.
No, Neil, I appreciate it. And apart from Saturday, I do wish you all the best for the rest of the season. And it would be nice to see, I suppose, another Midlands club back in European football again. So I do wish you guys all the best for that. And I'll catch you soon.
Likewise, Dave. Thank you very much.
Cheers, mate. So big thanks once again to Neil. I'll make sure I leave a link to him and his podcast in the description down below. And do let me know your thoughts and score predictions ahead of this game, guys. Hopefully a good end, penultimate game at Molineux, obviously. We'll play Everton in a couple of weeks' time, and hopefully we can just, finally get our Premier League survival confirmed with a decent victory on Saturday. Tough game, but come on, you Wolves. Be sure to hit the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, guys, and I'll catch you all very, very soon.